There are a lot of things that are on action figure collectors' list of pet peeves. And a big one is definitely the whole bait and switch. If you're not familiar with this concept, it's basically when you're shown one thing and you get another. Classic example from Toy World is kind of the sea monkeys, right? Everyone remembers sea monkeys from the back of your comic books and newspaper strips back in the day. You would see the cool characters hanging out by their castle, raising their families, and otherwise enticing you to order lots and lots of sea monkeys that you can train to do whatever you want. And when you got them, it turned out that they were just brine shrimp, and they weren't actually monkeys. In fact, they were these like little ugly aquatic creatures that just swam around and, did their thing. Hardly at all the colony of creatures that you could control like a mad scientist that the ad made you think. And obviously there were many different ads very similar, everything from 3D glasses to instant muscle kits and all sorts. Classic examples of the bait and switch. Well, in action figure world, sometimes that comes in the form of accessories, paint deco, and added parts that we see on figures that are shown publicly, and then when the figure ships, not so much. A couple examples from lines I worked on, you just saw Necron with his scythe, or Sith, not Sith, not like Star Wars Sith. And here is Strobo with his gun, and the gun did not ship with the figure. So this gets to be frustrating because you see the figure with all these added extra parts, added accessories, sometimes added deco, and then it's disappointing to find out that those accessories you saw that you signed up for, or at least even got excited for, you may have learned that the accessory wasn't included by the time the figure went on sale. But it's still very frustrating. Another example of a figure I worked on was Drago Man, who was shown with all these flame accessories, flaming sword, flaming whip, flaming shield, and when he came, not so much. Flame had to be removed. So, this video is about why that happens. Are we doing this, we being toy makers, just to piss off the fans, just to line our pockets with more gold dust and buy additional ivory back scratchers? Well, not so much. And while some people might see it as really not a big deal, especially in the case of Motu Classics, where we were able to get out a lot of those missing accessories in upcoming weapon packs, for fans, and I am a toy fan myself, I am also a buyer, it's a Bear Club for Men, we feel that we're owed. And the reason why this happens really looks at the business of toys. And all toys, like all consumer products, have what's called a target price. I don't mean a price you're selling it to Target stores. I mean a price that it costs to make. And for argument's sake, let's say the target price is $1, meaning it's going to cost the toy company $1 to make this Spider-Man toy. Obviously, it costs more than that, but we're just, going with a simplified number here. All right, so $1 has to cover the cost of the toy, the packaging, the shipping, and everything else that goes into the toy. And that's where some of these lost accessories come from. Because if the product is overcost, you have to look at what is the toy made of in order to figure out how you can bring it into cost. And the things that the toy is made of is basically plastic and paint, as far as physical what you're getting in package. But of course, there's also labor. Not that kind of labor, this kind of labor, meaning the labor to assemble the toy. And while this is what usually people think of in terms of production labor, the labor associated with any consumer product is actually a lot more than just this. And labor prices and material prices do continue to go up. That's why you see toys going up in price. Marvel Legends, I think, is going up $2 or $3 this year. So it's because the raw materials, and more so the labor costs, continue to go up year after year. And that has to be passed on to the consumer. The other part of labor, though, is what's called, it's the buildings and the material. It's the PB&G, the everything else that the company needs in order to make production. And this includes salaries for employees and healthcare and payroll taxes. All of this has to be accounted for in the product, because when you sell the product, the profit has to pay for everything that goes into making the toy. So, looking at the cost of anything, whether it's an action figure or in this case a house, you'll see a large chunk of the total production is listed here as supervision and labor. So yes, you have to pay this guy's salary. He's not going to make the toys for free, even though he kind of felt like he was for a few years, but that's not important right now. So, back to our Spider-Man action figure. Let's say he comes in and he costs $1.25, 25 cents over the target price, which has been assigned. So this is what's called a cost overrun. And it has to be dealt with because you can't produce a product that costs more than has been assigned to it. Nor can you simply assign higher costs. It doesn't work that way. At least, not in the business world where you have stockholders and you have finance reports that have to reflect cost of goods. So this means your choice is you have to reduce the cost of the product, or what's called a cost reduction. The words just get flipped. That's just the phrase that's used. All right, so obviously you could reduce the cost of labor, but you're really not going to find people willing to work for less. So look at what else we have. We could reduce packaging costs. We could have an innovative package or a smaller package. It's not going to save that much, but it might help. But it still has to fit on shelf and look good on shelf and not fall apart on shelf. So packaging reduction isn't usually an option. Instead, we have to look at the raw materials, the plastic and the paint, which is what an action figure is made up of. And that means you have a few options. You could shrink the amount of plastic. You could make the figure smaller. Probably not an option, though, because it is going to have a certain price value for the consumer at the SRP. You could look at eliminating certain parts. And obviously, certain parts of the figure you can't just remove, like, say, a head. You're not going to sell a figure without a head. And you could also look at removing deco. And this is why a lot of figures you see, like this shiny silver or gold Spider-Man, is one color. He only has one deco. Well, actually, that's vac metalized. Maybe it's a bad example, but you get the point. All right, so looking at a figure I worked on, this was Rattler in the Masters of the Universe Classics line. He was supposed to come with that neat little vest he has that was an homage to the 2000X 2001 Mike Young series, where Rattler wore well, he had a chest harness, and we really wanted to include this. Unfortunately, when the cost came in for Rattler, we found out that every single one of his scales had to be painted individually. We had costed it where we thought one stroke up and down the arm would have handled each color. But that's not the way the factory could do it because of the way the scales were sculpted. That didn't work. It came out sloppy. So in order for the scales to be painted with the 3 stripes, every scale was a deco hit. And every deco hit cost money. So in order to get Rattler into cost, the harness had to be removed. That removed a certain amount of plastic and a certain amount of deco. All of the deco hits that would have been on the harness could then be reduced in order to keep his stripes. Another example is just plainly losing accessories. You might have an action figure that's planned that comes with a ridiculous amount of accessories, and by removing some of these accessories and having the figure come with fewer, well, then you can get it into cost. And yes, I'm aware that I was just showing 2 different Swedish chefs from 2 different companies, but, the visual works. What can I say? So that's why a lot of times when you see an action figure prototype shown off at a convention or online, and then when it actually ships, it has fewer accessories, it's not because the toy companies want to be mean. It's really very much like a Sophie's Choice. It's deciding, oh my gosh, do I remove Rattler's stripes or do I remove the harness? It's not a choice usually brand managers want to make, especially if they're fans of the product they're working on. It's like being forced to do something. And it does come down to the way finance and accounting works. And you can't produce something over cost, over what's planned for. And obviously, companies do love their customers. But they also have to love the people that hold the purse strings, which is not just management, but more so it's the people who own equity, which is ownership, over the company. Which for most large companies, like a Hasbro and Mattel, because they're publicly traded, this means it's the stockholders. And they want product produced as, shall we say, inexpensively as possible in order to make the most amount of profit, because that's how they make their money, off dividends. And as the owners of the company, they're the ones who get to dictate this. So while it would be great if brand managers could just do whatever they want, and if they see a figure that needs an extra accessory like Necron and he needs his blade weapon, just to include it. Unfortunately, you can't do that, because if a brand manager just did whatever he or she wanted, well, he or she would probably wind up looking like this pretty quickly, because they don't own the company, they work for the company. And if they lose their job, then you wind up with this guy running the toy line, And trust me, you do not want this guy running your collectible toy lines. It would be in even worse shape than if you had someone who at least was familiar with the property. I hope this video explained a little bit about cost reductions and why accessories sometimes have to be removed. And hey, finance is fun. Leave your comments below, share this video, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next video.